Hey everyone! Just before we begin, I'd like to apologise for the video and audio quality at the beginning of this interview. This was a problem on my end where the connection was off because I had too many tabs open on my computer, but I promise the issues were resolved quickly and only last for a few minutes. Enjoy!
There's a ton of stuff that's happening in the world that you can bring into a regular show and comment on and blow up to be ridiculous. I was obsessed, not in a good way, but just like in like a train wreck kind of way when the Cybertrucks started coming out. And I was like, what is that?" And I think everybody felt that way. Though even the term Cybertruck seems like it came out of a regular show.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Regular Show Wiki's 15th anniversary interviews. Today's guest is a comic artist who worked on the official Boom Studios comic series writing 4 stories, Skykicks, Bathmat, Spoiler Alert, and Sad Mall, the latter two of which he also illustrated. Please welcome Kevin Burkhalter.
Hey, welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we'll start from the beginning. What was it that initially made you want to work as a cartoonist, and how did you get your start?
Well, I remember, I think a majority of cartoonists kind of start early on in their lives just drawing cartoons. So that was how I did it. Then slowly got introduced to comic strips, and I read a few comic books, but the thing that really changed my life was Mad Magazine, and uh, and so that really clicked with me as far as the writing went, as well as like the variety of artists that you would see in Mad. Um, and so I kind of became obsessed with Mad Magazine and I collected it. And then I discovered that my dad also had a collection, and he had like some of the first ones that were collected in magazine form, that were like, if the wind picked up, they disintegrate. But I loved reading Mad Magazine, and then I started just doing my own characters. I loved it, and then in high school. I decided I wanted to go to art college, so I went to the Savannah College of Art and Design for school, and they had a sequential art degree, which then I majored in, and I went into grad school for as well. And so I learned the ins and outs of making comics there, but I also met a lot of awesome, like-minded cartoonists in that program, and we'd be kind of cheerleaders for each other. We'd help each other out. We'd promote each other's work. We'd go to conventions together. We'd network together and just kept doing that. And along the way, I was self-publishing a lot of my work online, but then also in mini comic form, just getting it out there any way I could. And so were my peers, kept working away at getting into the comics industry. And one of my peers was Whitney Leopard, who also went to SCAD. And Whitney Leopard edited regular show comics for a while. I approached Whitney, and I said I had an idea for maybe a regular show story, and she said, "Yeah, please send it along." And so I sent that one with two more, hoping that at least one of them might be good enough. And she got back to me and she said she liked all three. And so that was a surprise, but that was a huge boost to my confidence. It was kind of my first real professional job drawing comics and writing comics. And so I was so excited, because regular show, I saw it and I instantly connected with the show. I felt like I was Mordecai. Like I felt like Mordecai, I was watching myself on screen, and I thought like Mordecai. I even, spoke like Mordecai sometimes. And so that made writing the characters really, really easy for me. I didn't realize that it's not always going to be that easy writing characters, but I just related to them so much. Um, So that's kind of how I broke in. And yeah, I still draw. I now I teach now at the Savannah College of Art and Design. And so yeah, I'm always kind of talking about the importance of relating to the characters and everything like that. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. But I tell students too, when I list out the steps that I took to get to where I am, it seems very linear, but it did not feel that way at all. It did not, like, it always felt like, I'll try this now. Okay, I'll go over here and try this. And it's just kind of a guessing game, but you got to keep at it. You got to just keep doing the work. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And I mean, I also edited comics for Dark Horse Comics, and that was like a whole other education, where I got to learn the other side of how comics get made, what not just the creative side, and that was amazing too. So I've kind of done a little bit of everything, and I feel just genuinely lucky to have had those experiences.
You mentioned that you kind of pitched three different comics. Were all those comics ones that you did that ended up coming out?
Yeah, that's right. That were my first one was spoiler alert, and then I pitched Bath Mat and Sky Kicks. And Whitney asked me if I was okay with sending those over to other artists to draw Bath Mat and Sky Kicks. And I said, of course, yeah, anything. So I got to draw, spoiler alert, while other artists were working on Bath Mat and Sky Kicks, which is pretty amazing. I don't know. I was not expecting all three of them to get picked up.
What were kind of your main inspirations for Spoiler Alert, and how did that come about? Was there any moment in your own life where you got something really big spoiled for you that maybe bled its way into this story?
Yeah, yeah, like I think we all do. I think we all get stuff spoiled for us. But I think at the time there was kind of like this fad. I think people still say it, but what they're if they're gonna like talk about a movie, or if it's like something that they did personally and they just say spoiler alert, I did that, or spoiler alert, it just was kind of thrown around. And I kind of caught on to that, and I was like, spoiler alert, what would I not want spoiled for me? And so then I thought about, like, well, would I want to be told how I die? Um, and then, like, that's kind of, I started thinking about that, and I was like, this would be kind of really cool to see play out with Mordecai and Rigby. And then I got to bring in Death. Yeah, that's pretty much where the idea came about. I mean, yeah, I've gotten things spoiled for me all the time. Um, I feel though sometimes, and I tell people this, I tell my students this, when they're like talking about the new thing coming out, and they want to talk about it, I let them talk about it. I feel also a little bit like I'm spoiler alert free in a way, where I will still go see the thing even if it gets spoiled for me. I think I'm just a fan of visual storytelling. So if it's a comic that they're talking about, or a TV show or a movie, I want to go experience it. I think there's the ending. The ending's not why we go to see things. You know, it's that middle part. It's that conflict of the story that draws us in, and the type of characters going through it. The ending really doesn't sell anything. It doesn't really convince me whether I want to go see something or not. You might know how it ends, but you didn't get like kind of that full journey of how they got there and what makes that ending so kind of unique to the situation from the story. So yeah, I kind of liked the just the idea of spoiling something really big for Mordecai and Rigby.
One thing I just found hilarious in the story as well was that this like group of nerds that go to watch the film, they're not. You could have just drawn them as a bunch of generic humans, but the fact that they're all dogs.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think I loved that the most about regular show was that, yeah, like I'm trying. It's been so long since I need to rewatch it, but like were like the hipsters like unicorns or something? What were the hipsters?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I was so inspired by that, and at the time I had a friend who had a pug, and I was just kind of hypnotized by just everything that dog did. And so I just decided I'm gonna make everybody a pug. Why not? Yeah, I don't know where that came from, but I'm glad you like that. It's fun.
Yeah, it's a great story. And another thing I noticed as well is because obviously this is one of the stories which you illustrated as well as writing.
Mhm.
The art style feels very reminiscent of the show itself, which I think works.
Yeah, thanks. That's what I was going for. I just, I had such respect for how the show looked and felt, and yeah, I sometimes wonder because I go back and I read my friend's work who also worked on the comics, and I was like, ah, man, like that's their drawing. They did that. I know that that's their style, and they got to draw Mordecai and Rigby in that style. Right now, I think that's a bit cooler than trying to mimic the style of the show. But I don't know. I'm glad I did it. I just respect to the show, you know.
This was also the first backup story in the series to be two issues. Was that something that you initially had the plan for, that it was going to be a bit longer than a traditional backup story?
I'm trying to remember how that came about. I think what I pitched initially was probably somewhere, it might have been 12 pages or something around 12 pages. And Whitney let me know that, yeah, like typically they're usually 6 pages long, but that we could split it up into two parts.
So we'll move on to the next story, which you did, Bathmat. What was kind of your main ideas behind that one?
I love Muscle Man. And actually Muscle Man is like I think he's closest to one of my friends from college. And so I think about my college years and how you know, I might have not have been the cleanliest person as far as, roommates go. But I certainly wasn't the messiest of my roommates either. And so, yeah, like I just got this idea just of like keeping things clean and who would be the perfect antithesis to like Muscle Man's funk. Benson. Yeah, so he was like the perfect foil for that. Just from there, just thinking about how crazy regular show you can go with regular show. Yeah, let's have a monster come out of the drain and let's see what happens. And of course, I like the jump cut of that one. The jump cut to after Benson takes care of the monster in the bathroom. Then we cut to the next day outside and he's assigning Muscle Man to go take skips with you to go clean the, the bathroom. That jump cut was actually um like kind of a last minute thing that I was like, how do I put a button on this? And it magically clicked and it felt true to the show, like just cutting away and just that one I looked at today actually, and the artist Carrie P just knocked it out of the park. It's one of those times as a writer, because a writer needs to, I didn't really know this or wasn't conscious about this at the time, but once the thing is written and it's handed off to the artist, that's no longer the writer's story. That is because the artist is bringing a lot of the acting, a lot of the pacing, a lot of story decisions to the comic. I what didn't really realize that at the time, and so I was like, please do a good job, please do a good job. And when those pages came back, my jaw hit the floor. That's how good I thought they were. That I was just so impressed because I've written not for regular show, but for other projects I've written for other people And I've had that experience where it's like, "Ew."
I'm just looking back at the comic now. There's a very cool usage of colors in that as well.
Yeah. Even the line art has colors flowing through it, like yeah, like I thought it just looked great and like new and fresh. Um and then when things get slimy and everything, it just works so well. Yeah, that was a great day when I got the copies of that one. That was good.
And then the third of those stories which you pitched was Sky Kicks, which was not in the mainline series, it was in the 2014 annual. There's a big basketball influence in this. Are you a basketball fan?
I grew up watching basketball. I grew up in the days of Michael Jordan. I um he was like my superhero, my real life superhero to me. Like whenever I'd be watching the Bulls, I might as well have been watching like the Avengers. I grew up coveting that first pair of Jordans, those shoes, those high tops, the red, the black. I love those. But as a kid, you don't think, $150 for a pair of sneakers. It's like, no, that seems so far away and unachievable. So with that one, it was definitely inspired by the shoes. It was definitely inspired by and I remember also a different shoe that I had as a kid that I was kind of, I felt pretty cool that I had, but was the Reebok pumps, the one with the little pump. And that's kind of where that idea came from, was that he's like, wait, I gotta get the juice or something, and he starts like pumping the shoe. As a kid, you believe that if you pumped the tongue of your shoe, it was gonna make you like do better. You know what I mean? It was actually going to give you some kind of superpower or something. And that's how those shoes were marketed, which is crazy. I feel like I didn't know how they would procure them. Like I just wanted them to appear. And so I kind of stole. I remember reading Calvin and Hobbes. Calvin and Hobbes had those the chocolate cereal or whatever. I forget what it's called. And one time he sent away for this helicopter beanie, and uh he is daydreaming about like flying around with his beanie on his head, like going around the like neighborhood with it and stuff. And then when he gets it, he puts it on and it barely spins around, and so I just like the idea of like when stuff like when you'd find toys and cereal and like when you'd send away for cool stuff. They rarely do that anymore. Now it's all QR codes and downloadable in-game stuff. But at the time, yeah, like I remembered thinking that was really cool and something I enjoyed as a kid. So I used that premise just to get things going, just to get the story right onto the court, as fast as possible. But yeah, it's kind of funny when you're writing these, you know, you're just thinking about the style of the show, or I am. I'm just thinking about the style of the show, and then I'm just handing it off to the artist. And like the energy that's in that comic is just like bizarre. It's outstanding. Like it's just Tess Stone's art is just kind of the epitome of cool. So slick. And again, another time where I get the art back and I'm like, what?
Those were the three stories which you initially pitched, but you did write and illustrate another story later called Sadmall. So how did that one come about?
That one, I knew I wanted to do more. And I think I did pitch more. I pitched like a longer form story that didn't get picked up. And then I think they did it eventually, but I was pitching the idea to Whitney of doing a regular show Adventure Time crossover. And so I was pitching larger stories. You know how they did a issue like the series about skips? She said to pitch a series about Muscle Man. And so I pitched Sadmall along with the Muscle Man. I think it was just business, but it happens all the time. And now that I have been an editor, I understand. But I think the budgets for the program kind of changed and shifted, and so they didn't end up going with my Muscle Man pitch, which is bizarre. But I could talk about that later. But anyway, yeah, Sad Mall was happening. I kind of like abandoned places. I liked when like that stuff kind of shows up in my feed. Like there's abandoned malls that you could go and people just take like a whole bunch of photos of, or abandoned hospitals in the middle of the woods, or that just really fascinates me. I get this kind of eerie, like kind of sad feeling, just kind of like, oh, like I imagine this was probably once bustling with people, where it was the height of commerce and it was like the coolest place to be. And there was a mall growing up like that. And I was growing up this was in the 90s. And in the mid 90s, I remember there was a mall that the only thing worthwhile was actually the movie theater that was there. And then it was this, gosh, I can't remember the name of it, but they would buy used video games and then you could, either sell or buy them. And so that's where that came, was just this real life mall. What was it called? I'm not gonna remember it, but yeah. So, and it just had tons of brick, and it was you'd walk on the way from the movie theater to the game store. There'd be parts where like they just turned off the lights, and so you'd be walking in this like a dark mall, and it was just eerie, and that's why I remember that too. I based the design of the mall though around this other mall that I would go to that lasted for a while, and last time I was home it didn't seem like it was still open and stuff, but yeah, it did have that kind of like empty vibe to it. I just like that aesthetic, I just and that weird like corporate art that you'd see like kind of in the malls, and yeah, that's kind of where it came from.
And you mentioned pitch for a Muscle Man comic series. What was kind of the story behind that?
So I don't remember the details, but the final climax was that this stunt park that Muscle Man was going to perform at, all of a sudden the stunt park became sentient and kind of connected like Voltron to make this like giant stunt park like monster. And so, in order to defeat it, Muscle Man would have to do tricks, like stunts on the different parts of the monster, and then that would like, the arm would fall off, or like it was kind of a wild idea. But yeah, I just thought, like, yeah, of course, Muscle Man is gonna do some stunts, but how can we make this like, bigger than life, just like the show is. And even though it didn't get made, I had a lot of fun with with that. Um, and yeah, I talked about the regular show Adventure Time crossover, and I always thought it was fun. I don't know if they did this in that crossover, but I always thought it'd be cool that like the house itself in regular show is essentially used as a plug to plug the portal to the Adventure Time like zone. And so one day that gets opened up, and that's how they kind of cross in to that. But like it's just the house, it looks like a regular house, but it's actually hiding this like really active portal that would connect the two zones.
The last page of the comic kind of feels a bit resemblant to what you're saying,
Oh, cool.
in that it ends with obviously both parties being back in their own universes, and then it ends with them both playing video games, and both of them are kind of connected together by BMO. I don't know if it'll show properly with the filter, but
Oh yeah. I always kind of hope that maybe the comics will come back. I'd like to write more.
it's not entirely out of the question, because Adventure Time has recently found a new licensee with Oni Press, and there is a new regular show series coming out on Cartoon Network. So that could mean more comics.
Yeah, that would be great.
Have you got any ideas without spoiling anything? Ironically, because your first story was about spoilers, about what kind of stories you'd want to tell?
There's a ton of stuff that's happening in the world that you can bring into a regular show and comment on and blow up to be ridiculous. I was obsessed, not in a good way, but just like in like a train wreck kind of way when the Cybertrucks started coming out. And I was like, what is that? And I think everybody felt that way. And so I think that could be fodder for like, some kind of, though even the term Cybertruck seems like it came out of a regular show. There's just a number of things now that didn't exist back when the show was coming out that I think you could comment on and bring in.
So you've said that quite a few of the stories you've done have been based on kind of personal things from your own life. Is there anything else that we might have missed that is from your own life that you've integrated into these stories?
Yeah, I think everything that I do is kind of based on my experience. I for a long time, and I still occasionally do them, but I'll do kind of diary comics, like journal comics. I was doing them every day in college. At the time, I didn't understand their value. The value was just to be drawing comics. Was just to be putting something up there for people to enjoy. Mostly my friends wanted to see themselves in the comics and stuff like that. But now looking back on them, and I have like a few collections, that's a time capsule. That is like I know that on August 23rd of 2009, I had a hamburger for lunch. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy that how fascinating that is to me now. Um, that I can go and look at mundane parts of my life, but then also I captured really crazy parts of my life. Like I captured my mom dying of cancer. That's documented in those journal comics. I documented me graduating from college. I documented um me, traveling around the world and everything. I mean, there were some big moments, but then there's like, oh, the time that I watched that one movie and I didn't like it. Like, it's all in there. Um and so yeah, I always am constantly farming my daily life for ideas. I tell my students too, even if your story takes place on the futuristic desert planet of, whatever it's called, you should be writing about stuff that's based on your own experience. There's something that you want to comment about, something that you see happening, and it's something you personally want to say about that situation. And the more personal it is, the better. And because those personal experiences and bringing your own personal life experiences into the story, that's our best weapon as writers against cliche and against being stereotypical. um like I give the example, like if I was going to sign you guys a project where you had to design a wizard school, but something about the wizard school had to be based on your own personal experience. Well, now we're getting away from, the most famous wizard school that we're all thinking of right now. And now we have different takes on that wizard school that seem new and fresh, you know? So yeah, I'm always farming, and as a writer and as an artist, I truly think that that's the best way into any kind of situation. Um, Storytelling, um, it's been around forever, because it's a way of connection with other humans, and I feel like I've wanted to tell stories because I want that connection. I want somebody to just connect with my experience, and I hope that to reciprocate that. Like I've read tons of comics where I just feel connected, to the artist that I don't even know, you know. I'm like, wow, that is crazy. Um, so yeah, absolutely. Every chance I get, I'm thinking of ideas.
And what would you say that your writing process is like?
I start out with an outline first. You know, I want to get the kind of the shape of the story. And I do this thing where I do a series of outlines and then I expand them each time I revisit them. So the first time I'm aiming for about a half a page, and I'm really only focusing on the what happens. You know, for instance, Mordecai enters the cave and saves the princess. All right. That's the what. We'll get to the how in the later outlines. All right. And then the later outlines, for every sentence that I have written in that first outline, I add three more to expand that moment. It's like zooming in on your phone, you know, you're like, psh, 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 psh. And so that keeps me on track, you know, because in that first outline, I have what I want to have happen. That's what I want the story to be. So then as I zoom in on each part, I'm always supporting what I wanted to have happen. And each time I'm expanding, I'm having to solve problems like, well, how does Mordecai get into the cave? You know, and then it starts to click and everything. And then once I have the expanded outline, then I'll think in terms of pacing, how long is the project, and kind of break it up into estimated chunks of length, you know, because page length is something that's so important to nail down. At first, those are estimates, but I'm always keeping an eye on how long the story is and what I've pitched it as and what it needs to be. Then from there, once I have those page estimates, I get to just start scripting. Um, and it depends on my day. Sometimes I'll start with the dialogue if I've got a really good idea for a conversation and happening, or I'll start with the visuals. You know, it really just looks different every day. I don't know, that's just kind of what works for me. I'm a believer in Save the Cat. I don't know if you've heard of that writing book, but I know a lot of people laugh at it, but I like the story structure in there. So if I'm telling a longer story, I'll start with Save the Cat because that's the story structure that I'm most familiar with. Um, and I view story structures as just a tool to get the job done. It doesn't mean that it's going to be brilliant or great or anything. But yeah, I'll always start with my personal idea. Then, if needed, I'll figure out I'll problem solve using any kind of tool that I have, a story structure or just kind of a new direction or you know. And sometimes when I'm scripting, I'll thumbnail. I'll thumbnail just really small. Not every page, but if I have a certain idea for the layout of the page, and I want to make sure it works and I want to remember it for later, I'll thumbnail it. When I wrote for other artists, like when I wrote Bathmat and Sky Kicks, I didn't do any thumbnailing. I wanted to respect the artist and let them do what they do. But when I'm writing for myself, occasionally, not every page, but occasionally I will thumbnail along.
When you mentioned about sometimes just start writing a conversation if you've got that in your mind, it immediately made me think of something I forgot to mention with Sadmol, is the beginning where Mordecai is talking about, oh, this game, like if you played it, and Musselman's like, yeah. And I just love how abruptly that conversation kind of ends, because Rigby is suddenly like, dude, I just killed Pops.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you know, like, and that I knew they were going to be like cleaning up on the roof and everything. But you know, you got to make that interesting. I remember doing tours around my yard as a kid, and I have three brothers, and so sometimes we'd be paired up to do some sort of task. So of course we'd always be like joking around and like, you know, talking about, you know, as we're older, of course, talking about video games and stuff like that. So that felt very organic and kind of a mentioning the game that they're eventually going to get was a really quick way to set it up. And again, that's just me being very thrifty, like not waiting to panel 2 or 3 to set up the video game, but just in panel 1 right there, that gets the ball rolling on that concept, you know. And I don't know, I don't think that that story is perfect, but I think I probably could have gotten to the mall quicker. That would be my one edit now would be get to the mall quicker. Yeah, that I really I really enjoyed putting pops in a place of, you know, like ooh, like I like that moment. And it had to be Rigby. It had to.
So we've spoken about your writing process. On the kind of art side of it, what would you say are the most important tools that you use?
Hmm. Well, here looking back at regular show, all right. Let's see. So spoiler alert was drawn all traditionally. And actually if you want, I think I can go find some of the pages. Do you want to see some of the pages for spoiler?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'll be right back. All right. So yeah, like I work traditionally with spoiler alert. This is the only one. Sadmo is digitally, but I wish I had kept doing them traditionally because this is published now. This is like out there in the world. This exists, and now I have like a tangible thing, you know. Um, but I guess basically what I would do everything in blue pencil. Um, and then go over it with at this point I was using a brush pen, a Pentel pocket brush, which I still love to this day. And then I would letter everything using a Micron 1. It's kind of a chunkier Micron. And this is kind of how my journal comics looked, like it was pretty close to the show. I didn't really need to change much. I was really kind of focusing on getting them on model as much as possible. I think sometimes I look at it, I think I made Mordecai's beak just a little bit too long in places. Here's the next page where they lock the monster in the cage. That was a fun Rigby. That was a good one. I got to draw skips. Yeah, got to draw our guy skips a little bit. This is like memory lane. This is great. All right, and then let's see what else we got. Then they go to the theater, and then they meet the pugs who are trying to sneak into the theater. And then they get caught by the manager. And yeah, I think I wasted an opportunity. Like I like the manager design, but I think now I would have based him on somebody that I knew. Um, but that's like an example of like an opportunity that I would look for. So then they end up sneaking into the theater because they got busted by or they got lumped in with the pugs. But one thing that I really liked is Mordecai's line here. Thanks, Mr. Deep Dish. Like that to me was like a moment where I was like, I don't think he's ever said that, but he would totally say that. Oh, and then Rigby says it, I guess, initially up here. Spoiler alert, deep dish. Yeah, they get into the movie theater, and it's all pugs everywhere sneaking in, and then they start the movie. But then yeah, like this sequence was really good. Or I had fun with it. Not really good, but like the waning patience of the audience. And then yeah, actually drawing the scene of the sharks. And then this is where they spoil it. And just drawing the absolute rage. Rigby, the absolute rage is just always fun. Oh yeah, and then I love this pug. I love how this pug, this bullying, menacing pug came out. It's my favorite one. Yeah, then they start like the trial. This is a fun because I hadn't really experimented with like a page tall panel in my work. It's usually grid. And so had a lot of fun with that kind of layout. Then our guy Death comes in. I had so much fun drawing Death. And even like this shot from behind where we see the spoilers and like, the back of Death's head. Really just I loved any opportunity to draw Death. And then, this is also kind of interesting, and I totally forgot this too. But in this page, another page tall, but then I change styles when the movie starts. I'm using a deadline, like just a micron, to show the difference between real life and, the movie and everything. I totally forgot that I did that. Um, I also took a page from Mystery Science Theater where I had the seats in the front, and then that goes on, and we get to that's the opportunity to show a lot of the cast. So yeah, like Pops, Muscle Man, and they think Muscle Man's gonna kill him, but he actually just moons them. And then at the end, this is the final page. Their death was so boring that everybody fell asleep, and so that's how they get to escape. Um, but then if you look, uh, that's me in the bottom left. So I'm always looking for, ways to sneak people in, especially myself. But yeah, I just totally forgot about. Thanks for indulging me with that. But that's why that you asked about my drawing process, and that's kind of why just this experience that we just had, I wish I had drawn the other one traditionally, you know, because I don't even know if I can access the files anymore. They're on an old computer. Um, it just kind of happens like that.
What would you say are your main inspirations from other parts of pop culture that influence your work on comics?
I'm always listening to music when I'm drawing. Um, if I'm not really problem solving, I'll have music on all the time. I grew up in a Beatles household. So my mom was always playing the Beatles. I thought we played the Beatles so much as a kid that I thought the Beatles were children's music for the longest time. You know, growing up, it was video games. I was in this crazy generation where we started out with the Nintendo, and then we like by the time I was in high school, we had like the PlayStation 1, the N64, and so there's a huge leap in graphics and technology and everything and how games are played and everything. So video games is a really big inspiration. And video games to me is another really excellent medium for visual storytelling. And I say this and I believe it. I think it is the probably the best medium for visual storytelling, better than movies, better than TV, and unfortunately better than comics. But for me personally, comics is my favorite one, But I'm just saying, as far as successfully conveying a story visually, because you're so immersed in the video game, it's the best one. It has just the best experience. Comics are also immersive in that way, but not quite as much as video games are.
Do you have any advice for people who want to be either a comic writer, a comic artist, or a cartoonist in general?
Absolutely. That's like my day job is advice for me.
So if you want advice, enroll at the school.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Yeah, enroll in school. No, but I say I talk at comic conventions and various places about breaking in. I would say this, and it sounds hacky and cheesy and whatnot, but that's because it's true. And it's, don't give up. Like just keep writing, keep drawing. Don't ever stop. If you do decide to stop, that's cool, that's fine. I have friends that went to SCAD that kind of changed careers. and that's totally cool. They're so happy right now. But if your dream is to draw comics, like, don't stop drawing comics and find different avenues to give them to people to read. Make sure that you're making them readable for an audience. That's how I kind of broke in, essentially. Was I was drawing the comics, but I was also putting them in mini comics and giving them out. And I'm sure I gave Whitney, the editor that was at Boom that hired me, I'm sure Whitney had some of my mini comics for when I was just pushing them on people, you know. Um, and like, just keep doing it, and show people your work. Tell somebody about your work. It's I tell students, you might be the best artist on the planet, but you're going to have a hard time breaking in if you're not showing the right person your stuff. And that's another key too. Be strategic to who you show your work to, and do that research. It's all available. Like, I just happen to have Usagi Yojimbo here. But if I was working on a project that might be in similar to tone to Usagi Yojimbo, if you open the single issue comics and you look at this boring side of the inside front cover, you have all of everybody that works on Usagi Yojimbo, including the name of the editor and assistant editors. And then after that, just go to social media and follow them. It's just that easy. Like, you don't have to stalk them, but just follow them and get to see what they're into, and get to know them. They'll also editors, most of the time, will put out on social media, hey, I'm going to this convention. Who am I going to see there? And then if you have the means, if you can get there, you now know that they're there. Um, but with that, strategically, being deliberate in putting out your work, but also being nice. Being nice is so important. And I learned that as an editor at Dark Horse. I wanted to work with good, nice people. I wanted to work with talented people that were drawing excellent stuff and writing excellent stuff. But if I didn't think you were treating me or one of my peers like nicely, I didn't really want to work with you. Is I didn't want to be on the receiving end of that. And so I think just simply being respectful and nice goes a long way, longer than you think it would. And then finally, patience. I think people that want to break in are very much like, I got to do it. I got to do it now. Got to do it now. Like, why isn't it happening for me? And then just be patient. If you are focused on your craft every day, like I said, don't give up. Keep drawing, keep putting stuff out. Someone eventually is going to notice. You will get opportunities. Finishing something is so important. Done is better than perfect. I always remind my students, done is better than perfect. And kind of know your process. We talked a lot about process. Like, know when your penciling process is done and when you can move on to inks. Know when that's done and when you move on. It's not a guessing game, and it shouldn't be a guessing game. The more you draw, the more you'll realize that. The less you'll overwork things. And actually, you'll be able to get to the next process and the next stage quicker. Same with writing. Know your process. If you do outlines like I do, know when that outline is pretty much done and when you can move on to the next stage. But yeah, like, knowing your process is part of it, but then also being nice and having people want to work with you.
That's great advice. And as we're starting to wrap up the interview now, I'd just like to ask, is there anything that you've been working on that maybe you'd like to promote?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, you guys can go to my blog. It's called Kevin Days a Week. And that's where I put my journal comics. About just sometimes they're really random, sometimes they're kind of life-changing events, but that's where I put stuff now, is on Kevin Days a Week. And I'm looking to do more of those soon. I've fallen off, but there's a backlog of, probably 200 comics up there to read if you want to read them. But kevindays.a week.blogspot. And yeah, that's pretty much what I've got going. I am writing right now, but I'm too early in the process to I don't want to jinx it, right? If you talk too much about the story that you're writing, it usually sometimes falls apart. And your brain can trick itself into thinking you've already written it, and then it doesn't want to work on the things.
And where might people be able to find you on social media?
I'm still occasionally on Facebook, but mostly I'm on Instagram. I'm also on Blue Sky. Let me just double check. Instagram, I'm Kevin Days a Week. And I think, yeah, on Blue Sky, I'm also Kevin Days a Week. Once you've got a good pun like that, you can't let it go.
Right. Kevin, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Gordon, thank you so much. I had a blast. And I like your shirt, by the way. I've been looking around for regular show merch these days.
It's from Hot Topic. They've recently started to sell regular show merch again.
All right, I'm going there this weekend then. Yeah, you used to be able to find regular show stuff at Target, but now I'm on the hunt again.
Thank you once again to Kevin Burkhalter for joining us for this interview. Once again, if you're interested in checking out Kevin's work, then go to his blog at kevindaysaweek.blogspot. The link will be available in the description. Next time, we'll be speaking with Ben Adams, a character designer who worked on almost every episode of the series, who is also responsible for boarding Death Metal Crash Pit and Slam Dunk. Here's a preview.
There was a Comic-Con, it was I think 2013, and actually the poster that you see behind me right here, I had designed like this, almost like this Where's Waldo style poster, and they gave them out, and I think there's only, I don't know, a few thousand of them. But what was really cool is I was just kind of like walking around Comic-Con, and you'd see people with their totes and that regular show poster sticking out, and like they literally just had no idea that I was the one that drew it, and I was just kind of like a character in my own poster, just kind of like lurking around with watching everybody walk around with my poster in their backpack. So that was really cool.